Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Sam, and today is going to be a different type of topic. Today we're going to be talking about proof. Now, I'm going to ask a very simple question and then we're going to unravel it and go through a few examples and then go through my main topic today. What level of proof do we need about the harmfulness of a certain activity before we act? Now, I'm going to give you a really quick example. Assuming the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was killing Chinese people. Now, before we act or before we accuse him, we'd want some proof. And we want to at least see... and first of all, it's definitely right to ask for proof before we accuse him. And it's definitely... we want to see some sort of evidence, whether it's video or photo or maybe there's a witness. And it's definitely the right thing to do to ask for evidence before we jump to a conclusion. But I think there are times and cases in our society where we ask for too much evidence. And a lot of times we have the desire for proof more of an excuse, whether we don't want to do it, whether it's an inconvenience, whether it's a hassle, whether we just don't believe it. And in the case where we don't do anything, we do let a lot of people suffer when it didn't need to be the fact. So the first case I'm going to talk about is something called black lung disease. And the first case we're going to talk about is black lung disease, or also known as coal miner's asthma. And back in the 1800s, back as early as 1830, this was already a known cause that coal miners would breathe in dust and they would have particles in their lungs and it would affect their everyday life. They would spit out black ink. Now, backtracking a little bit, in the turn of the 20th century, coal mine was a very important industry. It was used to heat your home. It was used to run trains. It was used to power ships. It was used for just to get electricity going. So all in all, the coal mine business was vital for the economy. Now, to get coal was very difficult. You would have to dig and you would have to go into a mine and then mine for coal. And you have this kind of big rock of coal. And once you get that coal, you bring it up to a separate room. It's called what's called a breaker room. And you kind of have to break the coal down into small pieces and into what we have now, where we use it for like maybe barbecue or where we use it for trains, kind of to start the fire. So you can imagine miners just breaking down the coal and all the dust is flowing from the coal, and it's pretty much pitch black in there. So in the 1900s, there was a gentleman named Frederick Hoffman, and he was a statistician. He was working for Prudential. Prudential is one of the big insurance companies back then. It's still around today. And he was pretty much an actuary, so he would have to find out how much insurance premiums they would charge people. So the miners, they're all complaining. They're all kind of always coughing. In fact, they're coughing up black ink. They would always have these coughing fits and they're just not feeling well. And so they complained to the medical team and also the mining companies. But the medical community and the coal mining companies, they had a very different position. They looked at it in a couple of ways. They looked at it and said, and the main reason why they discounted it or said it wasn't a big deal was because, well, if you're coughing it up, it means your body's working. It means that if you can cough it out of your lung, then it just means that your body's working the way it should be. It's getting rid of all the bacteria, all the dust, and at the same time, you inhale dust from everywhere anyways. You inhale pollen and dust and, maybe sometimes mold, but you breathe in all that stuff and everybody's okay. So what's the big deal with coal dust? And along comes Frederick Hoffman, the actuary. So he goes around town after town looking at different occupations, looking at their lifespan, and if people are dying early, then they need to be charged a higher premium. That's his job. In the end of the day, life insurance, if you die, you get a payout. And for the insurance company to make money, they have to charge a premium. So he insures a lot of coal miners, And he does see that there seems to be a problem. They are dying early. And in 1918, he publishes a paper pretty much contradicting the medical community and saying that there is a link between the coal mining and coal dust in your lungs to an early death. And then he looks at autopsy reports and he sees that from a coal miner's lung, about 1/3 of the lung is covered in coal dust. And if you look at a lung from a non-coal miner, you can see maybe 1% of the lung is covered in coal dust. And if you take those two lungs and you put them in water, the lung that was from a non-coal miner would float, but the lung from a coal miner would sink. And there's definitely something wrong with that. And if you believe that nothing is wrong with that, then I don't know what to say. And then he looks at the death rate of asthma. And the death rate of asthma from a coal miner is 5 times greater than one that is not a coal miner. And that's significant. 5 times is a pretty big deal. And again, if you look at the census back then, there weren't many people who were working in the mining industry after the age of 45. But at the same time, there are different occupations, and I'm sure it's a labor job, but if you look at farmers, there's still a good number of them working as farmers past the age of 45. So in the end, Frederick Hoffman said that this miner's asthma is something that we should be concerned about. So here we have a senior statistician from a major insurance company publishing a report back in 1918 saying that there is a link between coal mining to an early death because of coal mine dust. And he's raising the alarm bells. So what do you think happens? Nothing happens. Nothing happens for 50 years. 50 years until they confirm that there is a link between coal mine dust and black lung disease that causes a shorter death. And the thing is that if you want proof, if you really want proof, it actually takes a really long time. The only way to really get proof is you would have to do a study, and you had to take a bunch of coal miners and you had to take a bunch of non-coal miners and you had to track them throughout their lifespan. You had to see how they live and when they die and what's the cause of death. You get to track it on the other side as well. And when it's all said and done, you have to look at it, and whichever one dies sooner and is significant enough. But that could take years. And at the same time, you had to track so many people as well. And nothing happened. Nothing happened because everybody said you have no proof. And at the same time, do we need any more proof? Or did they just not want to change? Because if you would have to accept it, then it would cost a lot of money. You would have to change the structure of the mining industry. You would have to change how it's done. You would need a lot more air filtration. You would maybe need masks. It would be super, super expensive at the same time. There's such a high demand for coal that I don't know if people would want to buy the coal. So all in all, nothing happened for over 50 years. And the next example I want to talk about is cigarettes. Again, Frederick Hoffman had linked cigarette smoking to lung cancer back in 1915. And what did we do about it? We didn't do anything about it. Everybody kept smoking. Everybody denied that smoking causes cancer. And it wasn't confirmed medically that smoking and also secondhand smoke causes cancer until the late 1980s. At least here in Ontario, it was up until 1994 where they banned smoking in workplaces. It was up until 2015 where they banned smoking from restaurants. Like, think about that. A report was written back in 1915 saying that there's a link between smoking and lung cancer, and 100 years later, 100 years later, now you ban smoking from restaurants. And why wasn't it done? It's because people wanted proof. People didn't want to change. People cigarette companies want to sell more cigarettes. If you told people that it was dangerous, they're gonna lose their business. And if you ban it, of course they're gonna lose their business. No one wanted that. And people smoking, they didn't want to be told that it's dangerous. They enjoyed it. The next example I have for you, and we're doing this right now, is football. Now, we all know for now that playing football is dangerous, especially the defensive linemen. And there's been studies on and on about this disease called CTE. It's pretty much the deterioration of your brain. So every time you get hit, it can cause a concussion. So your brain is pretty much mush inside a hard skull. And when you hit your head, your mush brain hits against the wall of your skull. And you do that enough times, then your brain will turn into mush. Now, here's the thing. Can you prove it? There have been a number of football players, whether it's ex-football players, current football players, people in high school or college that have committed suicide, and when they looked at the autopsy of the brain, they saw they had CTE. So CTE is not something new. CTE has been around for a long time. It was first discovered in 1928 in kickboxing, and it was more recently rediscovered by a Norwegian African scientist back in the early 2000s, and he studied the brain of a few Pittsburgh Steelers players, namely Mike Webster. This scientist had all this research back in 2005, and the NFL didn't want to hear anything about it. Right? There's no link. Concussions happen. There's no proof. It wasn't until 2016 the NFL pledged $100 million towards the research of CTE, and that was when over 100 ex-players died of this disease. And why didn't they want to believe it? Well, football, NFL, it's a money-making machine. Every Sunday, NFL has their own day. The Super Bowl is the most watched event in North America, probably the world. And you want to tell the NFL that their players are in danger and maybe not hit as hard? Maybe the alternative is to play flag football? Is that what you want to tell them? Of course they're going to say no. They didn't want to accept it. It wasn't until 2016 they had these concussion protocols. Once you get a concussion, you got to sit out. So they're trying to prevent the number of concussions. And to this day, we still don't know the true cause of CTE. We don't know how many numbers of concussions. We don't know whether it's a bunch of small concussions or we just need a few large concussions. We don't know when, because when someone practices, they have been as young as in high school where they have died from CTE. But the biggest question about all these examples is, how much proof do you need? Now, coming to my last topic is COVID-19. COVID-19 is a virus that's in the same families as SARS and MERS. So here in Toronto, we had SARS. Back in Hong Kong, they had SARS outbreak. Japan, Taiwan, they had a SARS outbreak. So we definitely had it before. And we also know that COVID-19, this is a novel virus, meaning that we don't know too much about it, but we do know it's in the same family and we should at least treat it as such. So here's the question. Why were we so late to wear masks? Why were we so late to testing? Why were we so late to accepting that there would be asymptomatic carriers? Why were we so late to accepting that it could be in the air, smaller than droplets, it could be aerosol? There was a case back in Washington State where 60 people in a choir, they sang for 2 hours. It was a choir practice. It was a choir practice. They sang for 2 hours. 45 people out of that choir got COVID. So that's just one case. But is that enough proof for you to let you know that singing is dangerous? For me it is. That's more than enough proof. There was a study in China, and that it showed that airflow in a restaurant, there's a carrier A, and it affected other people depending on where the airflow of the conditioner was. Is that enough proof to let you know that restaurants are dangerous, and if you don't have a mask, it's pretty dangerous? For me, it is. 100%. It's definitely enough proof. So the biggest question is, why do we keep asking for proof that masks work? It was kind of obvious that they did. At the very least, they would cover your mouth. And if you just think of it in common sense terms, you're letting less particles come in and less particles come out. So it's at the very least a filter for the air. But why do we keep asking for evidence? And the main reason why we kept asking for it was that we as a society we didn't want to wear masks. It was inconvenient. It was inconvenient, it was uncomfortable, it didn't look nice, it wasn't fashionable, and on top of that, it was made a political statement. And if you wore a mask, you also looked weak. So I'm going to leave you with this. How much proof do you need for you to wear your mask?